The fear of the Lord is not to be scared of God. How can we have a relationship of intimacy with somebody we're afraid of? And this is God's number one desire for every one of us, is to be intimate with us. The fear of the Lord is really actually more about being terrified of being away from God.
Before we get into our conversation, my name is Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. Hey there, folks. I'm excited about my guest right now. Many of you know him. It's John Bevere. If you don't know him, well, what can I say? He's an international best-selling author. He's written more than 20 books that have collectively sold millions of copies and have been translated into over 130 languages. That can't be right, and yet I know that it is. My books have only been translated into 25 languages. I am really impressed. John Bevere, welcome to the program.
Quality, not quantity, Eric.
Yeah, quality languages.
Your books are quality.
No, they've been translated into quality languages. 25
there you go.
Quality languages, not 130, any language. Seriously, congratulations on that. As an author, I know it's kind of a big deal. And of course, we're here to talk about your brand new book, The Awe of God. Talk about a big subject. What led you to want to address that subject, the awe of God?
Barna did a study in 2022, found out that over 30 million Americans have walked away from the faith. They're now professing agnostics, atheists, and spiritualists. I cried out to God. I said, God, what is going on? And God showed me it's the lack of us preaching on the fear of the Lord. Let me just give you three quick scriptures. Isaiah 33:6. The fear of the Lord is God's treasure. Now think about it. How do we handle our treasures? How do we look at our treasures? Isaiah 11:3. The fear of the Lord is Jesus's delight. The New Testament, Paul said, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, not love and kindness. And so if we step back and we take a look at this, we're talking about God's treasure. We're talking about Jesus' delight. We're talking about the very thing that matures our salvation. Psalm 19 tells us that the fear of the Lord cleans us and it causes us to endure forever. Lucifer led worship right before the throne, Eric. He saw the glory of God. He didn't fear God. He didn't endure forever. And what really woke me up to this is when I was in the federal penitentiary with Jim Bakker in 1994. Jim Bakker, as you know, had the largest ministry in the world in the 1980s. I knew of him well. I had never met him in my life. He read the first book I wrote on going through hardship. It impacted him so deeply, he asked that I would come visit him. So here comes this man who has been on CNN every single night for his trial. The whole world knew him for the wrong reasons. He grabs me, he hugs me, he won't let me go. And he looks at me, he said, did you write this book? I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, we have so much to talk about. So he sat down and his first statement to me was this, Eric, this prison was not God's judgment on my life. It was his mercy. John, if I would have continued living the way I was living, I would have ended up in hell forever. He said the very first year of prison, God sent a man in here and he got all the evil. And he said, John, there was so much wickedness in me out. And so when he got done telling me his whole story, I, as a young 35-year-old minister, I said, Jim, I have a massive question. I said, at what point did you fall out of love with Jesus? And he said, John, I didn't. I said, hold on a minute. You committed adultery, and I named the woman's name in 1983. You were sentenced in 1989. You're doing all this wickedness you're telling me about as the largest ministry in the world. What do you mean you loved Jesus all the way through it? He said, John, I didn't fear God. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And he said, John, there are millions of Americans, they love Jesus, but they have no fear of God. Jesus's love keeps us from being legalistic, but the fear of God keeps us from lawlessness. And Eric, I'm concerned what is causing so many to fall away from Jesus is the fact that we have preached a grace message that almost, it doesn't encourage, but it permits people to go into a lawless lifestyle. And now Jesus becomes fictitious. His presence is not real. And so it's more of a club to them and they walk away.
Have you written a book about this? Because this is hot stuff. I got to tell you, this is so vital that I'm thrilled to hear you say this, because I've been thinking about exactly this for some time. We go through seasons, right? You get people that they're raised in such a legalistic environment that, or there's so much legalism out there and people preaching kind of legalistically that over time we reject it, but we reject it so much that we go, it's kind of like you go across the road into the other ditch. That's exactly what you're talking about. Bull markets turn everyone into a stock market genius. Bear markets reveal who truly is. If your portfolio isn't hedged, you're gambling. A single market correction could wipe out years of gains. For nearly a decade, my friends at Noble Gold Investments have helped investors diversify by adding gold to their portfolios. Gold may help you preserve your upside potential and limit your downside risk. Visit noblegoldinvestments.com and learn how easy it is to incorporate gold into your investment strategy. noblegoldinvestments.com.
The fear of the Lord is not to be scared of God. How can we have a relationship of intimacy with somebody we're afraid of? And this is God's number one desire for every one of us, is to be intimate with us. The fear of the Lord is really actually more about being terrified of being away from God. If you remember, Moses said to the people of Israel, when God came down on the mountain, the people all screamed and ran away. Exodus 20:20 makes a statement. He says, do not fear, because God's come to test you to see if his fear is in you, so that you may not sin. So no, wait a minute, Moses, are you talking out of both sides of your mouth? Why are you contradicting yourself? No, what Moses is saying, don't be afraid of God. Don't be scared of God, because God's come to see if his holy fear is in you. And by the way, he said, so that you may not sin. If you look at Proverbs chapter 16, verse 6, it says, by the fear of the Lord, one departs from evil, not by the love of God. That's when I saw that experientially with Jim Baker. He said, John, the love of God didn't keep me from lawlessness. The fear of God keeps me from lawlessness. I believe that's why it's God's treasure. I believe that's why Jesus delighted in it.
I've got a lot of thoughts and questions, but the first thing you just said off the air, that this leads to a thought or two about the upcoming election, the subject of the awe of God.
Absolutely. If you look at we are told in Scripture to pray for those in authority, to give thanks for those in authority, to honor those in authority. When Peter said, fear God, honor the king he's talking about is King Herod Agrippa I. He was murdering Christians just to advance his political agenda. Yet we're supposed to honor. How do you honor a king like that? You don't honor his behavior, you honor his position. And so when people understand that difference, and that comes from the fear of the Lord, because the Bible says the fear of the Lord actually gives us an awareness of the authority of God, because the Bible's so very clear that all authority is from God. So the behavior is not from God, but the authority is from God. And so that's what you honor. Now, if we're told to do that, how much more on a republic? When our forefathers set this up so that godly men and women could give voice into leadership, I believe that the Apostle Paul would have been living in the United States. He would have said also vote. Now, here comes the problem. When people vote, they vote according to personalities, or many of the Christians out there are saying, I'm not voting at all. To be honest with you, believers are the majority in America. And if you have 20, let's just do 20 people that are godly, they got the Spirit of God in them, and they say, I don't like either candidate. So 15 of them say, I'm not going to vote. And now you got 5, and you had 10 ungodly voters. Well, now the ungodly people become the majority. It's not that we're voting for somebody, it's we're voting for what is best for our nation. And so I look at how believers should vote. It should be this. We biblically vote. We don't emotionally vote. And I think the best thing, Eric, is look at the 10 Commandments. The first 4 of the 10 Commandments tell us to honor God. The question you ask on either candidate, national, state, or local, which one honors God more and which one opposes God? To be honest with you, if I have to choose, and I won't choose probably either candidate, I'd probably think of somebody better, but I've got to give voice to one. So if I'm choosing either one, I'm going to say, which one honors God more? So part of the Christian experience is Jesus said, I will manifest myself to you, which means he makes himself real. And God has said, I'll walk with them. I'll live among them. But there's a condition. He says, because in Paul in 2 Corinthians says, having these promises of God living in us and among us, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and our motives, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. So true holiness, Eric, let me just say this. I love my wife, and I don't want to commit adultery with my wife because you know what I don't want to lose? I don't want to lose the intimacy. When our heads are on the pillow and she tells me something she would not tell anybody else. What people give up when they flirt with lawlessness is not only do they risk judgment, but they give up intimacy with God. And that's the very thing their heart cries out for. So that's why Psalm 25, verse 14 says, friendship with the Lord is reserved for those who fear him. With them, he shares his intimate secrets.
Beautiful. John Bevere, thank you. Folks, the book is The Awe of God. Thank you, John.